Hello everyone, my name is Voya and welcome to My Deep Guide. A couple of days ago, Onyx Boox released a new update for their Note 2, Nova 2, Max 3 and Poke 2 platforms, and it's the update 2.3.1 and introduces actually quite a lot of new features and upgrades, so let's check that out. Here it is, update 2.3.1, and even though it's just a 0.1 update from the version 2.3, it introduces a ton of new things. So let's try and cover most of them so that you guys know what's added, how it works, and yeah, what to do, what not to do. First of all, while we're here and before I even start, there's a new thing they've added here, and special thanks and a little flower here. And if you tap on it, you get a little thank you note from the Boox team to all Boox users. And even though this is a small thing, I think that it actually matters a lot, and it's something that does show dedication and care from the team, because they certainly didn't have to, but you have to add a button, you have to add the graphics, you have to add a pop-up, you have to add something that some other companies might even call a new functionality, to actually add a special thanks here, and they actually did it, so that's something that I really appreciate. Now on to the new features. The first new feature is the ability to customize your home or home screen. So if I go to more settings, now you will see that we have an option called custom homepage. Once I click on it, these are the options that you can choose. And as you can see, they correspond to all of these on the side. So we have the library, store, notes, storage, apps and settings. And the way it works, for example, now I have my notes set up, and the double click on the navigation ball is a shortcut to home. So if I double click, it will now just get me to notes. So I think that this works pretty good. The only comment that I have about it is that I wish we had one more option, which is continue where I left off. Not necessarily maybe as a home screen, but just as an option to have your device, when it goes to sleep or when it shuts down, next time when it's powered up or woken up, that it actually goes back to the mode where you were in. So if you were reading an EPUB, then into that EPUB, onto that page, all of that kind of stuff. If you're writing note, into the notes mode, opening the notebook that you had and on the page that you were at. So I think that's something that would really make it come together more nicely, and it's a feature that I really love on the SuperNote A6, and it's something that I've grown accustomed to, and it is something that I'm missing in other devices. So it would be nice to see that functionality in some of the future updates. In this update, the default Neo reader has also been revamped a little bit and has a couple new functionalities. The biggest one is the ability to recognize text-to-speech on the document itself. So, for example, I could just write now here, this is my TTS example, right? And now I just need to double tap on it. It's recognizing, and it works kinda, sorta. If you have a bit too much of a space between, it will not be able to understand that this is all the same thing. And I think the limit is 0.5 centimeters or something like that. So half a centimeter. If you have bigger space between the words, it will not recognize them. So then you have to tap again, and now it actually recognized this. So that's one way. So now let's try and write it a little bit more densely. This is my example. And I think I might have too much here as well, but let's try. There we go. So then it manages to kind of figure it out. I think it's a little bit too sensitive, and I think it's way too individual. If you write in a very large or in a very small format, that's going to be something that's independent from individual to individual. So I think we would need an additional setting for this text-to-speech option, so that we can customize for our own needs or improve the algorithm and kind of try and understand and in an intelligent way, deduce what the person's tendency is to create those spaces and then try to recognize within those spaces. So that second one is obviously a little bit more difficult, but it's not unreachable. I mean, all it needs to do is recognize everything, see the spaces, compare them, find the median value, and then use that to recognize spaces. That's just something how I would actually do it if I were developing this. But as it is now, I think it's not flexible enough, and I think it's something that people are going to be stumbling upon when trying to use it. So yeah, definitely, if your handwriting is uniform and your spaces are uniform and all that kind of stuff, and you write very tightly, then I think it's going to work really well for you. Otherwise, I think you're going to have a little bit of a stumbling experience, as I showed in the first example. How does this actually function? Well, it's quite simple, because all it actually does is these are text boxes. So if I open up the Scribble tool and I tap on a text box option, so now when I actually choose this, you will see that this is a text box and this is a text box, and then I can just space and I can continue writing. So let's just add a comma. This is actually a text box. All right, so definitely works. One thing that you need to know, like really need to know, is that the text conversion process is irreversible. So there is no way for you to, once the text has been converted to this, you cannot revert back to your own handwritten notes. So it's a one-time thing. There's no going back. The second thing is, you may wonder, like, okay, but how do I get rid of it? You just need to go into the Scribble toolbar, activate the erase option, and then you can just simply erase the text boxes, and that's that. The recognized text will appear in the table of contents as scribbles. Okay, so if I now double tap on it, maybe my spaces are okay. Okay, that was good. So now I have, this is my example, and if I go back into the table of contents, if I go into scribbles, you will see that, there we go, page 4, this is where it appeared. So now I have other scribbles as well, but it will appear not as an annotation or anything like that. It will still be a scribble. The only difference is that it's in a form as a text box. Another thing that I think is a bit problematic is that, for example, if I were to add a text here, which is something that most of us actually do. So this is my note, and I double tap on this, it will recognize all of it or some of it. However, the biggest problem is that if I were to go now into a text box and I want to edit or select that text box, I can't, because the keyboard has covered it up completely and there's no way to do anything with that. So as soon as you're in text box mode, if I wanted to start adding things like I can here, it's not possible to do in the ones that are covered by the keyboard. So that's something that definitely doesn't work. It is also said to recognize shapes and lines. So let's see, I haven't tried this, but it seems to be, seems to be working. It seems to be very flexible. So I could maybe draw a right angle triangle. Not really. And does it work with wavy lines? Kind of, sort of. This is actually quite useful because maybe I could then write something like this. No. Okay, it's a little bit hit and miss, so some of it works, some of it doesn't. But yeah, that's how it is at the moment. I think definitely a lot of improvement needs to come into play to make this fully usable. It's a nice introduction, but not entirely usable as it is now. The second big improvement is actually pretty cool, and that is the floating toolbar. And for those with a little bit more of a keen eye, you will see that my toolbar looks drastically different with which icons and functionalities it has as to what we had previously. So the toolbars, the floating toolbar and the scribble toolbars can both be now fully customized. And you do that by going into the menu, then you go into more settings, and now we have the new part here, which is called floating toolbar settings, and we have 3 options. Incidentally, before I get into it, handwriting recognition settings for some inexplicable reason are in the floating toolbar settings, but okay, they are there. So these are the options that you can use also additionally for setting up your handwriting text recognition setting in the Neo Reader. However, what we are interested in are the general settings and scribble toolbar settings. If you want to think about it, the general settings is the floating toolbar settings and the scribble toolbar settings is the scribble toolbar settings. So a little bit kind of weird, but all right, fine. So in the general settings, this is where the stuff is, and as you can see, we have very complete set of customization options. So we can enable toolbar or disable it completely if you don't want it. And as I've shown previously on the Poke 2, we have the hide floating toolbar indicator when it's collapsed. So it's gone away, but you can swipe it from the side. Then you can actually scale the size, and it scales the icons and everything. So it can be super tiny or it can be super large, and you can control the percentage from 50 all the way to 150 scale. As before, we have the vertical and horizontal style, but this is the area where things are, and that's where stuff is important. These are the icons that will be shown in your toolbar, and these are the icons or the functionalities that you can swap between. Now, if you're not used to what each icon means, you can always just simply do a long press and it will show itself above the icon. That it is navigation. If I long press here, it will say split view and current view and current document. This one will be hand touch switch. If I want here, it works the same way everywhere. So it's a very easy and convenient way of understanding which icon is doing what, especially, for example, next page, previous page, and next chapter, previous chapter. So these things are, I think that's a very handy kind of thing to know. And the way you can rearrange stuff is you can just simply long press and drag and release, and that's it. I have mine configured that I have my scribble tool, palm rejection, table of contents, navigation, and then dual screen options here. Similarly, you have also the scribble toolbar settings. It works exactly the same way. You can scale it, you can have it horizontal or vertical, and do the same stuff as well. And reset button on both the general or the floating toolbar and the scribble toolbar simply resets to the default setting. So now we have a toolbar that's hidden when I don't want it to be. I can simply swipe in and choose any of the modes that I'm using most often. I think this is a superb addition, and it improves the Neo Reader functionality even further. Now it's actually even more accessible, so I really dig this. Really cool. A couple of new features also added in the update 2.3.1 is that now the formats DjVu does support a table of contents if the file itself originally had a table of contents. So that's something that's added. There's another thing that's also added, which is the text-to-speech timer function. So now in the progress, if we go to text-to-speech, we have this whole new section down here, which is the timer. So that by default there is no timer. It will read like before until you stop it manually, or now you can choose 15 to 90 minutes in increments of 15 minutes and then it will automatically stop. So that's something that's kind of added. I'm not entirely super certain like why, but okay, apparently some users needed it and now it's there. This next one is actually pretty cool, and that's a full new app called the calendar Memo. So first of all, don't confuse it with the old calendar. You still have the calendar, And now you have the calendar memo. So what we're talking about is the calendar memo. And if I start it, it's a whole dedicated app. And what it does is it actually keeps track and an overview of the day's readings and note-taking activities via the calendar. So as you can see, I've been using my Poke 2 a lot, and Nova hasn't received a lot of attention. But yeah, I was scribbling some stuff here, and I was testing the 2.3.1, and yeah, these are the things that I've been adding. So you can see what I've created. So in the left corner, you will see what are the today's notes, today's readings. And then you also have the memo that you can add. For example, today is the 19th, and here are the notes that I've been writing, and it's actually telling me, here they are. That's what you did. And then I can just say, all right. Calendar memo works. Scribble, scribble, yeah, but it's basically a memo. If you want to add another one, you press on the arrows here, and then this is my second memo of the day. And I can press again, and then I have a third one, or maybe I don't want the third one, and then I can just delete the page. So in essence, it's creating a tiny little notebook, and it's just using it. And you can delete, of course, and you can also send via email. So if I send via email, then it will send fail because I'm offline. However, if I do get online, then probably it will have an easier time sending it. Let's try and send it now. And it's sending it normally. In the settings, you will also have the option to define which is your default email. If it's not configured, on the first time you try to send something, it will ask you, and then you can just kind of configure that. And you can also configure what's your starting date or starting day of the week. So I think that this is a super useful addition. One thing though, I just now tested it on Poke 2. Typing doesn't work as typing, even though the release notes say that it works as typed text. It doesn't. It works like this, which is totally silly. I mean, this is unusable. What am I supposed to do? I can only erase the whole thing, and then this sucks. Yeah, this basically sucks. I think that a memo, or especially on Poke 2, would have to be something that's a keyboard input, but then you also need to have a little box above the keyboard that shows you the text that you're inputting. And I think that the same thing can be used for the problem of the keyboard overlapping with the text box. So if the keyboard is now showing what is the text that you're typing and what's the text that's been typed already in a text box or in a memo, then that would work. However, as it is now, the memo thing on the little Poke 2 really doesn't work, and that blows. I really don't like that. But yep, oh well, maybe that gets fixed soon. I miss the option of adding the memos here via the keyboard as well. I don't see a reason why should it always be a handwritten note. Of course it's nice and fine, but it would be nice to have an option at least. So I think that would be a good thing to have. The memo that's been sent comes to your inbox in this format. The subject is memo underscore, and then we have the date, and then we have the time, and that's pretty much it. And it says that it's coming from Onyx Boox to contact, and the memo itself comes in the form of a PDF attachment as a scribble thingy. So I think that works, but my main issue is that it would be very nice if we could customize the subject or the body, or maybe have a default text for the body of email, some more control over the formatting of this email that's being sent as a memo, I think would be a lot more usable, because right now it's like just this as a subject and no body email and just an attachment. That's like inviting the spam filter to take this and say, hey, this is spam. Now it didn't. For me, Gmail recognized this as a valid mail. It didn't raise any flags or anything like that. But what I do know is that weird subject lines, no body in the email, and just an attachment, that's something that's an orange flag for any spam filters. Also, I think it would be nice to have the ability to customize these things so that you can send out your memos the way you want it to. Another new app and functionality is called the Screensaver, and now we have the ability to customize the behavior in this Screensaver Styles, so to speak. So if I go into the Screensaver, you have a couple of things to choose from. Like before, we have the shutdown image setting, which you can choose, and then we have something new called the Screensaver Style, and we have currently 3 different Screensaver styles to choose from. Style number 1 is the original one that we had before, but it has a couple of new things added, such as you can choose between having an analog and a digital clock or no clock at all. You can have the clock refresh interval is between 1, 5, 10 and 30 minutes, because less it refreshes, less battery it will consume while idly standing by. Then you can choose the text color, white or black, and then you might be thinking like, what kind of text? Well, the text of the date and time, but also the text display here. It can be a motto, which you can configure. It can be a signature, which you can also configure, or you can show nothing, as I have chosen to do so. And finally, in the end, you also have the bottom status bar, which will show the battery and the info on how to wake the device up. Selecting an image works as before, so you can also just simply select anything that you want, and that's pretty much it. Most of the functionalities of these are transferring between styles equally, but before I continue on to styles 2 and 3, word of warning, prior to updating, they do warn you that you need to back up your screensaver images, because the screensaver functionality has been revamped completely, so your previous images are going to be lost. So back them up and then update, and then you will be fine. Once you have all the settings the way you want them to, you hit apply, and what you see here will be applied. Now on to style 2. Now style 2 is a little bit different. We still have the type of clock that we want. We can have the interval, the text color here, bottom bar, and then also something called the show border. So if I apply this now, what did this do? Short note, what is that? Well, this is actually the memo that I wrote. And not only that, each time the device goes back to sleep, it will cycle between the pages of the memo. In this case, I have 2 pages, so first it's going to be page 1, and then I wake it up, and then I go back to sleep. Now it's going to be page 2. So this is kind of cool, and I really like it. The only thing that I am missing is the option to have a black background and a white clock, of course, but it would be super cool if we could have this in black and then just the note standing here. I think that would work really nicely. And then finally we have the transparent screensaver, or style number 3. What this does is basically just keeps what you had before. So let's say that I was reading a book, I don't know, this, whatever it is, and I press shut down. Now it is sleeping. Now it is powered off, but it's transparent and it's showing the last thing that you worked on. Word of warning though, obviously don't leave any sensitive data or sensitive information showing here, and use a transparent screensaver, because common sense and brain stuff, like, kind of obvious. I think that the Screensaver edition is really cool. My preference currently is this one, and I really like this edition. Another addition is now relating to the notes themselves, and that is the addition of a brand new brush type. And the brush is called the writing brush stroke. It's this one over here. It is supposed to emulate an ink brush, and it's a move in the right direction. It definitely works much nicer. If I am just writing and I want to emulate look of ink writing, it definitely works. So for writing, I think it works, and you have enough sensitivity and all that kind of stuff that it does the job okay. Where it doesn't work is if you would naturally want to start drawing and painting with it, because it does trick you into thinking that you have enough sensitivity, and you should have, because remember, we have 4096 levels of pressure sensitivity. However, now at the maximum setting, even if I just simply touch, look how thick it is. It's really, really thick, and then I increase. This is the maximum thickness. My main issue is that the sensitivity is not nicely calibrated. We should be able to, even on the maximum width setting, we should be able to, if we're barely touching the screen, we should get a very, very thin line. And then as you exert maximum, then you approach towards the maximum width of the brush. Right now, that is not the case. It's far too insensitive, and I think that a simple change like that will transform this brush into a super useful tool. So I just wish that they would improve the sensitivity to brush size correlation, so that when we actually go to the maximum brush width, that we can still get the full range of the brush, from the thinnest when we're barely touching the screen, and then all the way onto the thickest level, because then we're going to have a really, really useful brush. However, as it is now, for writing, it really works great, and it looks very nice, and it feels very nice when you're writing. And I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I just think that it takes just a tiny little bit more, that sensitivity thing, to actually transform it into a really, really cool addition, but definitely a step in the right direction. Another addition is the ability to customize or addition of a floating toolbar in Notes as well. And the very first time when you maximize, you will get a dialog that asks you, do you want the toolbar always to be here, or do you want or do you want it hidden so that you can swipe like normal, right? However, I can't find that option anymore. It just appeared first, and I can't find anywhere the option of switching this so that it's hidden by default and that I swipe it up. So now I have to hide it and then unhide it. It's not a big deal at all. It definitely works, but it would be just nice to have that option to kind of set it up. Now, the floating toolbar, again, like in the Neo Reader, is fully configurable. So if you go into three dots, you go to customize toolbar, and the same exact story is here. Scale, orientation, reset defaults, and exact same thing here, except that now we have the functions and tools related to the Note app itself. So it works exactly the same as before. I think it's a super, super useful addition, and I find myself using this all the time. One thing that's not so loudly listed in the update is the fact that the translation has been changed, and you will notice here that we no longer have Google Translate. We only have Bing or Baidu Translate. So for some reason, Bing Translate service is now used instead of the Google Translate service. And while it does work, it's nowhere near as good as the Google Translate is. So I don't know why this was done. I just want you guys to be aware of it, that this is something that has been changed, and it is a thing that's been introduced since 2.3.1. We no longer have Google Translate, we have Bing Translate instead, which I don't like, but it is what it is. Alright, so that's obviously a big update, and I like most of the features, I really do, especially with the floating bars and all of that kind of stuff. I think it works really, really good. As with any big update, there's of course going to be some teething problems. That's something that's normal and that's something that's expected, but the main indication is going to be how agile will Onyx Boox team be to react to fix things. And one of the things that I've already noticed is that on the Facebook Onyx Boox fans group or something like that, there was a user who was experiencing some issues with the screensaver. If you were drawing or writing on a notebook and you use the transparent screensaver, some of the last strokes would get lost if the synchronization was not done properly, etc, etc. And I think 24 hours or 48 hours from that post, there was a subsequent small update issued by the Onyx Boox that addressed that specific issue. Now that is a really good indication. So yeah, update 2.3.1 has some issues, but they are being addressed as we speak, apparently. And also it has some areas where I think the improvement would even bring it further. So one of the main ones for me is the ink brush. I think full sensitivity would really elevate that brush to be really cool. And also for the calendar memo, the ability to actually type in the memo itself instead of just scribbling, and in the case of poke to finger painting, because that kind of doesn't work. Those are small things, but I think they're kind of important to elevate the functionalities of the new tools because they are really good. Overall, I really love the direction where this thing is going, and especially those floating toolbars, the customization and everything. I know we had from before the ability to hide the floating toolbar and swipe it back up, but now with the combination of being able to fully customize it exactly how you want it, that's a huge deal. And it just, for me, it improves the overall day-to-day usability of the device by a large margin, not by a small margin, by quite a lot. So update 2.3.1, some teething problems that are obviously being addressed as we speak, but overall I really like it. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!